Hi everyone, welcome to the first Tribe webcast or podcast. We're going to be focusing on things people need to be doing to get ready for peak in one of the strangest years we've ever seen. We're joined today by Mr. Ed Perchik from our good friends Tacit Knowledge. Hi Ed, thanks for joining.
Hi, it's a pleasure.
So Tribe are web performance specialists focusing on loan performance testing, peak readiness, ongoing performance monitoring, and Tacit Knowledge are very close friends and a system integrator. Ed, do you want to give a brief overview of what you guys are about?
Yeah, sure. So we are all about crafting sustainable software and extendable software for our clients. Ultimately, we want to make technology an enabler so that it can reduce friction from all our clients. And the primary focus is in e-commerce and on e-commerce storefronts.
Cool. Thank you. So, yeah, we're talking today about preparing for peak, which is, as we all know, is not too far off now. And it's been an interesting year with COVID-19 and lockdown, and the focus on digital is huge. I read recently that 17.2 million consumers have pledged that they will shop solely online. Which is just massive. So there's going to be more pressure on retailers, obviously, to maximise that channel than ever before. So it's interesting to hear, Ed, what you feel e-commerce businesses really need to do to be ready for peak.
Yeah, sure. So as we've been discussing about before, of course there are some common activities which happen every year, but a lot of businesses and our clients, what they're taking into account is that there are some additional things that they need to be thinking about. The need and the dependence on peak has been absolutely magnified through a whole quarter of lockdown. So some retailers, particularly in the home working and home improvements sector, and especially those with a smaller store real estate, have done well through lockdown, but in general, though, it's been a very challenging period. And actually, for those retailers who have done well, they really need to look at some of the lessons they've learned through the unplanned peak. So some of those, they had a huge surge, particularly at the start with toilet paper and the like. And so looking at how their sites were able and their operations teams were able to cope with it. And of course, there's a bit of a paradox here where businesses are trying to protect their resources. We've got big retailers like John Lewis, like Dixon's Carphone, WH Smith going through significant restructuring at the moment to protect themselves so they can plan in case of another lockdown. But the real paradox is that the investment in digital to drive peak revenue butts up against the need for stability and to protect that revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes with the same challenges that I'm sure you and we see every year of the conflict between getting new functionality and delivering value to customers versus being ready for that peak, because any change brings with it risk. And if people are trying to cram in more of that work, whether it be functional changes, additional third parties, or technology changes, that's going to be almost magnified this year. Is that something you're seeing with your clients?
Yes, it is. I mean, and I think the single biggest thing we've learned over the past few years is that the most important thing is collaboration. So work with your marketing team, understand what planned promotions, user journeys are going to be. Work with your performance partner and your technical team so you can assess which of the changes and which of the developments could have the most significant impact, so that you don't have to wait until you hit code freeze before you start your peak readiness and preparation. You can already be working with your marketing teams and your UX teams to look at having optimized or lighter pages in the user journey through the purchase journey. You can look at removing friction, but also by removing that friction, you also increase the capacity of the site by removing some of the load that it would normally have. And in tandem as well, you want your performance partner to be looking at how your users are behaving and forecasting how they're going to behave, using analytics and user tracking tools like GA, like Hotjars. And it's those conversations across the different parties which are absolutely critical.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think that collaboration happening earlier in the cycle is important because it allows all parties to understand the priorities and what's coming and what's changing, and being able to react and adjust flexibly to that to make sure that the testing schedule matches with the release roadmap and what other changes have to be done, so that everyone's on the same page right from the beginning. I think that just makes a lot of sense. And obviously that flexibility means you need different types of tests being run as well. I guess, a lot of our clients, we historically would focus on just doing the traditional big peak test, that one last big bang, let's make sure we're ready. And then, inevitably we find loads of problems and they've not got time to sort them all. It's about being ready early and maybe doing a series of tests as those changes go in, so you can, adjust as you're finding things and be more ready.
No, exactly. And the thing is as well is that the value of a load test is being able to, as closely as possible, predict how the infrastructure will cope at a particular level of traffic and with particular behaviors from the customers. So knowing the journey they're going to take, if you're setting up some new promotions and a new landing page for them to all be funneled through, making sure that that's performant. But then it's also looking at making sure that it's run either in production or a clone of your production environment, so that you can simulate things like looking at scheduled jobs which we're running, like search updates or back office usage, which can create bottlenecks in the database. And also making sure that you're looking at when your code freeze can happen, if there are any maintenance patches or updates which need to be done, running the final load test after those have run. But then also there's a whole gamut of things which you need on your checklist. So, for example, it's a really good opportunity to review your CDN coverage. Is your caching, since the last performance test you've done, has your caching configuration been kept up to date with new functionality which may have been rolled out? It's a really nice opportunity to review also the other external tools and third parties which you may have in your site. So A/B testing and multivariate testing is a brilliant tool, but sometimes it can be used to introduce additional load or additional functionality which may not be being considered. And similarly with tag managers as well, it's easy to forget just how many third-party libraries can be introduced. So that can slow down performance for the browser trying to render the page. You can introduce single points of failure as well. So if you have blocking JavaScript calls, blocking Ajax calls, you can actually, if one of those third parties suffers an outage, it can cause your site to go down. And finally, just purely from a security perspective, you need to audit them so that you can ensure that if any of them suffer a breach, that you can immediately disable them, and that you always know what libraries are being utilized. And one final thing, I guess, on this kind of part of the conversation as well, is also just thinking about the payment process. So we spoke about smoothing the process and removing friction, but especially this year, if you've got a payment provider that has a mechanism for spreading payments out, like Klarna or like PayPal Credit, then this year that's certainly going to be even more important than in previous years.
Absolutely. And I think that ties into the whole third-party piece, and including payment providers and gateways. That's the whole reason for testing, as you rightly say, on production, or an exact clone of production where everything is configured and integrated. Because if you're not testing that, then you're not testing where your customers are. And it's really important that you understand what the capacity and the performance and stability is in that environment, with everything there and present.
I guess the other thing I was going to ask you is how many of your clients you find use the load test also as an opportunity to draw up some run books. So, for example, firstly, there's looking at, how do you scale your infrastructure? If you're not lucky enough to have a cloud native application which can be set to auto scale, then having a run book for scaling up the infrastructure through the peak season, but also how they learn to identify the patterns which mean that the infrastructure is coming towards what it can cope with, and so having other mitigation plans ready to engage, whether that's a waiting room or throttling or other measures.
Yeah, absolutely. And queuing is a really topical item, isn't it? Because there were so many of them utilised through lockdown. Some of the biggest retailers around were deploying them for lots of different reasons. Fulfillment, capacity, everything going. But yeah, that's a really valid point, is using load testing and performance testing to work out what the best scenario is. Do you deploy more infrastructure, or is it more cost effective to cap it and say this is where we're going to really start to creak and we need to deploy a queuing system of some kind? I think everything should be on the table, but by doing that test in the right place with the right profiles, you can get a real understanding of where that limit is.
No, exactly, and that's been the experience of ours working with our clients as well, that you understand where the breaking point is. You test way beyond what you're expecting your traffic to be. You understand where the breaking point is and how to identify it. You look at how you can scale up, and then you look at how hopefully you'll be getting so many orders. You then also potentially need to look at how to protect yourselves, and it's having all those run books in place ahead of time, testing them so that the operations teams don't need to ask and there aren't some very difficult decisions to be made. So yeah, that's definitely shared by us.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and what would you say as a closing remark? What's the silver bullet? Well, there's no silver bullet, but if there's one thing that's the most important thing in all of this and getting ready, what do you think it is?
It's as we were talking about before. It's collaboration. It's making everyone in the business understand what their area of responsibility is, so that we can work together effectively. Making sure that the marketing teams have got enough time to be able to plan what's needed, making sure that the UX is planned out in time, so that the technical teams, whether they're in-house or a systems integrator like ourselves, and their performance partner, and again, whether the performance testing is being done in-house or through a company like yourselves, everyone needs to have that conversation to prepare properly. And if you can do that, then you can have a smooth and fruitful peak.
Absolutely agree with that. Excellent. It's been really interesting talking to you. Thanks for joining us, and we'll speak again soon.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks very much, Al.
Thanks, Ed. Bye for now.
Cheers.